Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. Today we're talking about the most controversial aspect of Gary Gygax's masterpiece, The Dungeon Master Guide. Back here on page 192, opposite this iconic artwork, America the Chaotic, by the legend Dave Trampier, we have a little table. It's called the Harlot table. Now hold on, don't freak out on me. Just settle down. We're going to talk about this like reasonable adults. And we're going to come to a greater understanding of how this table fits into the game and why you should not be afraid to include this in your game. But before we do, we need to talk about what this is not. And to understand what this is not, we have to understand how the traditional view of Dungeons and Dragons as a war game leads you to different applications than the modern day version of Dungeons and Dragons. When modernist D&D players hear about the Harlot table, they get all freaked out because they make a lot of false assumptions about what it means to use this table. To understand why, we got to talk about the different mindsets that the different players bring to the game, the different approaches. And it's very simple. It's all about the focus. It's all about what modern day critics call the lens. You have to understand that classic D&D players take a much broader focus on the game. They are worried about the movement of armies. They are worried about the clash of civilizations. They are worried about much larger and greater events than your modern day counterparts. Now, our modern, and you can see this, and we're going to set this encounter aside for a moment. We'll flip to the combat encounters, which are, I don't even know what page. There we go. Combat encounters. There you go. In this version of D&D, combat rounds last 1 minute. You deal with the murder of your opponents. It's not murder if it's self-defense, right? But you're killing someone. You're taking the lives of your opponents. And for some reason, that's fine, okay? But you know, when you move from murder to the harlots, everybody gets weird. Now, and the reason for that is that when we're talking about combat, traditionalists will zoom out. We're going to send our 3 henchmen off to the left-hand side. Our barbarian will secure the right flank while our 2 archers look for targets of opportunity, focusing on spellcasters. We all know that the thief is going to hide in shadows and circle around to the back. The dungeon master has to decide how the opponents are going to act, and then you roll for initiative, and you deal with initiative by side. And it's a very grand and sweeping idea of what combat means. Modern D&D players use a 6-second combat round. They have replaced the kind of grand tactical game for a whole lot of meaningless busy work. They engage in the equivalent of pixel bitching. You've got your 5-foot grid on the table and you count, oh, well, my fighter's going to go 5, 10, 15. Oh, I have to avoid this attack of opportunity, 20, 25. Okay, well, I can't get there in 30 paces, so I'll have to come over here, but now I've got an obstacle and I have to do an acrobatics check, blah, you know, and then now that it's time for the attack, I am going to whirl my blade and I'm going to attack at his ankle or it's very detailed, and we get into the physical mechanics of, are you trying to kick a guy in the forks? Are you trying to conk him on the head? AD&D doesn't worry about that. We just want to know, are you attacking? Are you hanging back? Are you firing? Are you casting a spell? Those little intricacies don't make that big of a difference. And by the same token, when we talk about the resolution of a combat round, your classic wargamers are not concerned with the gory details of what happened. You did 12 points of damage and you put him down. He is no longer a threat. He's heavily bleeding and has collapsed to the floor. When you're dealing with 6-second rounds, you may discuss things like, oh, gray matter spattering the wall behind the target, or you've clipped a femoral artery and a crimson spray of blood washes over your face. That's gross. Okay. You don't have to engage in that level of mechanical detail for combat. And now that we've established that your traditional form of combat zooms out and your modern day version is worried about the mechanics, now we can go back to the Harlot table and understand why modern D&D players get confused. Before we talk about women who rent their affections for the evening, we can talk about roleplay elements. A modern day wargamer is very concerned about specific words. And, a modern day D&D player. Classical D&D players, not so much. A classical D&D player, having captured an enemy, bandit, will say to the DM, we're going to question him and threaten him until he tells us where the bandit camp is. If he's sitting across the table from a modern-day DM, then the DM will say, well, what exactly do you say, and how do you say it? Well, and you have to say, well, okay, I guess I say, now listen here, we're going to cut your fingers off. Well, he's not going to answer. Do you cut his fingers off? Whoa, now that's gross. Again, right? We don't need to deal with those intricacies. We're going to put a soft focus on this encounter. And we're going to advance the game by, yes, you question him and you either get information or you don't. The camp is 2 days north. A modern D&D player wants to deal with all of the intricacies and mechanics of that questioning. Which finger do you start with? Gross. Now we can finally talk about the Harlot table. What is this used for? A modern day Dungeons and Dragons player will say, that's really gross. You mean to tell me that you, a dude bro, is going to sit across the table from a dude bro DM and you're going to play out all the mechanics of a romance novel and you're going to exactly, how much does it cost for this act and how much for that act and how much for, well, and I don't want to get too gross, right? Because we all know what these ladies do to pay the rent. We all know what these ladies do to not get beat up by their pimp. No, that's not what we're doing. At the worst, a classic D&D player will say, look, my guy is an anti-hero. He's going to go visit the horror houses for a night. Okay, cross 5 gold off, and you're going to be at, -1 to attacks because you're tired the next morning. We're done. We're in, we're out, we're done. We don't worry about the mechanics of this. But that's even a little too dialed in for your typical classic D&D player, because you have to understand that you cannot take this table in isolation. You don't just get to see this part of the rules. This is part of an encounter that is itself listed on the city and encounter matrix. How likely are you to encounter a harlot in the first place? Well, in the daytime, you've got a 40, you're only going to hit it on a 40 or 41. 1 out of 50. At the nighttime, it's 44 to 50. What is that, 6% chance? Right? So 3 out of 50. Hey, you're 3 times as likely to encounter a harlot. I guess that makes sense. They don't call them ladies of the night for nothing. Then the next question is, well, what kind of lady of the night have you encountered? And here we're going to take a look at some of the other aspects of this random encounter matrix. We need to see how other things are applied. But really, I think one of the things that's important to understand is that this city-town encounter, you don't need to go out and buy a whole source book for building a city encounter. All you have to do is read these rules and apply them. There's some really good stuff in here, right? The prime cities, towns in a campaign will usually have predetermined denizens, and encounters will be set according to facts thus developed. In other words, when you sketch out your city, you will create a matrix or a table that is specific to that city. You will take things out and add things in the exact same way that you will do for a dungeon. I'm dealing with a dungeon where a giant ant colony has, the dwarves have accidentally broken into a giant ant colony. And the dwarves have recently overcome like the neighboring orc tribe, and they're using the orcs as slave labor. Hey, look, we got 3 factions in our dungeon. What are the 3 most likely encounters that we're going to have? Ants, dwarves, orcs. Orcs in charge of dwarves, orcs trying to rescue more orcs. You've got a living, breathing dungeon based on that random encounter table. And for some reason, people understand how hex crawls work. Like, we've talked about this for 40 years. But the city encounter matrix tables, people never really talk about how this does the exact same thing that the wandering monster tables do for your dungeon. These can be used to create a living, breathing city without having to go the Ed Greenwood, water deep. Hey, I've got a map that's covers whatever, 6 square feet of table, and I've detailed every shopkeeper, every town guard, every magic user, every political faction, every crime boss, and all you have to do is read this 400-page tome and memorize this map, and now you can, play this city. No, you don't need to do that, right? There are things you can do, thanks to Gary's genius, that will allow you to breathe life into a city, and even as the DM discover the characteristics of the city through play. Even if you have no idea what the city is like, and that's where this table comes in. As your players wander the streets, they will encounter various dangers and various opportunities. One of those opportunities is the Harlot table. And now we have to go, well, before we get into that, let's look at one other thing here. What are you likely to encounter? Well, here's a table of drunks. And wait a minute, you can encounter assassins? Now, this is a paid killer. And for some reason, encountering a paid killer, nobody bats an eye. But you encounter a paid lover and everybody loses their minds. I'm not going to do the Joker impression, but you get the reference. Hey, we've got drunks, 1 to 4 tipsy revelers, or wine-sodden bums, right? So we got a 50-50 chance. And one of the fun things about this, you can use this table and the descriptions of these encounters to determine what sort of world Gary is envisioning. It's one where drunks are likely to be encountered. In fact, you can even find out, there's a 1% chance at night and a 4% chance, 4% at night, 1% in the daytime. And then we can find out, what kind is it? Maybe they are drunk assassins. Maybe they're drunk city guards. Maybe they're off duty, right? Hey, noblemen, merchants. Which is more likely? Well, if you look at the odds here, you can kind of deduce. 6% chance of gentlemen, 2% chance of noble. Well, that makes sense. Wealthy merchants are going to be more common than nobility. 4% chance of ruffians or thieves, or, there's even an encounter here for press gangs. Press gangs they're basically slavers, right? They're dragging you off the seat and pressing you into the military. If you're in a port town, we know they're going to put you in a boat. If you're not, they're probably going to put you into like a labor camp. Anyway, the point is that you can use this table at your game to discover what the city is really like. You roll the dice, and as people are encountered, you're going to find the same thing that happens whenever you use the rest of these random encounter tables. You will find out who and what lives in these areas. Hey, I have rolled 3 times on, we'll just pick one at random, the temperate and subtropical. I keep rolling up bugbears. I guess we're in the heart of bugbear country. Right? I rolled 4 times and 3 of them were bugbears. Well, we know there's a bugbear encounter nearby. I've rolled 4 times and I have encountered 3 harlots. Well, okay, so what do we know? Through sheer random chance, we know that this city that we are discovering through play is a city kind of like, I'm trying to think of a historical example. And I think we should pause here to talk about the historical examples because, and we'll come back around to our city where harlots are very common, okay? In some cities, based on the character of the city, they will have different kinds of encounters. Some cities, very lawfully aligned, right? Your pseudo-Christian cities will force that into the shadows. That will only happen down dark alleys. You'll have to know a guy that knows a guy. You'll have to get information on where those go. Or you'll have to be in the right kind of city where they kind of turn a blind eye to that one corner, but nobody really, that one, couple of square blocks, that red light district, for example. Or perhaps the city takes a much more libertine approach. Maybe it's more like late stage Rome or I believe, Paris at various times when everybody openly had mistresses and, people didn't judge you for hiring affections. You will find out what kind of city you have. If you are rolling a whole lot of courtesans, well, what do we got here? Let's just look. A lot of slovenly trolls. It's a good bet you're in kind of a depressed city, a city that's fallen on hard times. There's not a lot of money. There's not a lot of jobs around, and or maybe a war just ended, and there are a lot of women whose husbands died who still need to put food on the table, and they have been forced to. Right? Like Berlin after World War II, they have been forced to shack up with the enemy in the wake of a heavy defeat. Or, I have to say Berlin after World War II. This is a commonplace occurrence every time a country loses a war, right? The women get with the winning side. And if their men are all dead, they got to eat. What if we have a whole lot of wanton wenches? Well, all right, so they're out in the open. That's the haughty courtesans. These are women who are looking for expensive doxies, right? These are Women who are looking for advantage, and they are using their feminine wiles to get it. And here's where we really kind of turn our attention back to the historical examples. There are examples of Chinese courtesans who became empresses. It happened to the Byzantines at least once. I may, if I remember, put some like articles from Infogalactic or, just quick headlines. You get the idea. And here's where we circle back around with some of the other videos that we've discussed. And I think we really do need to pause. We need to note that the people who are very open-minded have very narrow ideas about what it means to be a harlot. They treat these women the same way that a wealthy oligarch treats his employees. These are faceless cogs in a machine. You put your quarter in the slot, you have your good time, and then you move on. These are not real people. And I have found in my experience that people who are more likely to use this table from a much more role-play perspective. They do not view these encounters as, just another whore. They use these encounters the way they were intended. They personalize these NPCs. These NPCs become more than just a collection of body parts for rent and become living, breathing people with their own hopes, dreams, and desires. When we talk about the slovenly trolls, these are going to be very sad women. These are going to be women who are desperate at the end of their rope. These are the kind of women that provide an opportunity for clerics of good aligned deities to find a way to rescue these women from the slavery of sin, from having to sell their bodies on the market. If that is the market of the city, suddenly your player characters may have some incentive to get involved in city politics. We've got to clean this situation up. Alternatively, if you've got a city where your haughty courtesans are, and I don't know if you knew this or not, but if you can use sex to control a man, then the woman can take control of the city. And I can't believe I have to point this out, because your modern D&D players are steeped in the lore of, I'm not a big fan of Game of Thrones, all right? I think it's dirty and gross and obnoxious, and it has very few redeeming qualities. But I think that the example of Littlefinger provides a very valuable example of how you can use the harlot table as a faction in the city. The guy that's running the show within this industry can wield enormous influence. Not power, as we saw in that particularly nasty TV show, but this is a faction. In the same way that if you roll a whole lot of monks, this must be a city with a very large temple. This must be a holy city, right? The monks at the temple represent a faction, and maybe they are trying to drive the ladies of the night out of the city, but the ladies are protected by the Thieves Guild, by the brigands who also show up. So you have to crack the Thieves Guild to free the ladies to do the bidding of the monks. Hey, look at that. You've got a faction at play. You've got a political situation at play. So look at how we've zoomed out, and we have stopped thinking about these encounters as, that's gross. You're just going to have sex on camera with, and you're going to role play it out with your DM. No, of course we're not. Stop thinking like you always think. Use your imagination. This is an imagination game. Sometimes it shocks me how little imagination people that play modern D&D have, and how unskilled they are at stepping into the skin of other players. We see this in the Wizards of the Coast product. Their products are it's modern day Seattle with sparkles, and you get to choose whatever form you want. Although that really is modern day Seattle, isn't it? Point being, don't be that guy. Understand that there's a lot of different ways to play, and understand that the harlot table shouldn't be treated with any degree of shock or outrage. Start thinking about how you can use this table, not in and of itself, but as part of a larger breathing city. Now that's a lot of talking, and I think it's worth pointing out, I still haven't read the description of Harlot that we've got here. So let's zoom our own lens in and take a look. Harlot encounters can be with brazen strumpets or haughty courtesans, making it difficult for the party to distinguish each encounter for what it is. In fact, the encounter could be with a dancer only prostituting herself as it pleases her, an elderly madam, or even a pimp. In addition to the offering of the usual fare, the harlot is 30% likely to know valuable information, 15% likely to make something up, and 20% likely to be or work with a thief. Oh, isn't that something? You mean to tell me that this can be used as a springboard for other adventures, and that the players might not know which is which while they're distracted by the lady of the night, her partner is over there slitting purses? Huh? Well, that could be interesting. Or maybe, what if these ladies are a front for the Assassin's Guild? Man, the opportunities for adventure here are rife, and you never need to get into the mechanics of the business aspects of renting your body for the night. Now, here's an interesting one. This is written from a very interesting perspective. Trolls, strumpets, trollops, streetwalkers, tarts, wenches. You know, our sly pimp appears. Wealthy procuress, right? What if you had a city where these were reversed? And it was Amazons where the men had to resort to this, right? There's all kinds of possibilities for adventure in here. And people just get all weirded out. You don't have to do that. Use this as it's presented. Treat it like you do anything else. What do you expect would happen? And then do that. And then I think we've said enough about this particular tiny slice, this puzzle piece, and how it fits into this larger puzzle of city encounters, and how that fits into the larger puzzle of randomly randomly exploring a world, whether it's wilderness or random dungeons or random cities. Zoom out. Take a much broader view. Flex your imagination muscles. The more you flex them, the stronger they grow. The more you'll be able to do with not just this encounter, but all of these encounters, and the much more living your world will feel. After all, as long as Grug and Thag have wanted Thagina's affections, Grug has bonked Thag on the head, or Grug has attempted to bring home the largest slice of mammoth meat so that Thagina or Grugina would choose him over his rival. They don't call it the world's oldest profession for nothing. We talk a lot about murder, death, kill in this game, and there's no reason to shy away from this particular aspect of human nature. The other thing I'll point out is that you can take this as seriously as you want. You can treat this as very earthbound, very mechanical. Or one of the ways that we kind of put a soft gel on the lens after we kind of, put a softer focus on things, is that our knight is a knight of, our cleric worships, what was it? I think it was Banjo. Who was the puppet in, you guys probably know this better than I do. The Order of the Stick, the bard had a puppet that he was, we've got guys, remember we talked about, not Trollopolis, Brovenloft, right? We had a literal vampire puppet. Vampires are terrifying. Ours was the Count. Our mummy was a rapper. That's how serious we take this. And by putting that humorous spin on things, we kind of have a much softer focus. There's no reason you can't put the same soft focus on these. If you're going to roleplay specific encounters, hey, what if, now who's your inspiration here? Right? One of the best prostitutes in modern day cinema, I guess you could call it, is Maya Rudolph's performance in Idiocracy. She was the smartest woman in the world at that point. She was charming, she was bright, and the instant she didn't have to engage in this, she didn't. She became a powerhouse in her own right. Take a look at Neil Stephenson's The Diamond Age, one of the prime movers and shakers in that whole epic cycle is the I don't remember who she is. She was a member of a harem in the Ottoman Empire, and she was an amazing woman. You don't have to treat these like pathetic, lost, broken souls. You don't have to treat them as body parts. There's a lot of adventure here, and you can treat it with the same level of severity that you do everything else, and it becomes a valuable addition to your table. Don't shy away from this. Just be a grown-up when you use it, the same way you do with paid assassins, right? This isn't hard, guys. Just think about it. Be a grown-up. Realize that this is a very complicated situation and treat it with the seriousness it deserves, which may not be very much if you've got a vampire puppet who's a critical threat to the campaign world. Anyway, that's all I got today. Till next time, I'm praying for you.